All right, well, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for the pasty. Amazing, brilliant. I mean, as a northerner, moving to Cornwall and having pasties on my doorstep, brilliant. But yeah, well, first of all, I'll start off by, thanking Lindsay for putting the partnership together, so amazing. But also thanking everyone, because I know you guys voted on which organisation to support, so, thanks for chucking your weight behind the work that we do. So hopefully today is going to be a chance for you guys to kind of learn a bit more about that, engage with the work that we're doing and find out what it is we're doing and why it's so important. So yeah, so thank you so much, for the pasty and the support, so brilliant. So I brought two things along with me today. One is my client and ambassador, Willow, who's currently mopping up my crumbs from the pasty. And I've also brought this along. So anyone want to hazard a guess what it is? We can start with tree and then and then narrow it down. It is an oak. Any advances on oak? That's pretty good. We can start with oak. But this is a Cornish oak. So if you live in Cornwall, you call it a Cornish oak. If you live in Ireland, you call it an Irish oak. If you live in Wales, you call it a Welsh oak. And if you live in France, for some reason, they call it an Irish oak. Don't know what they've got against the Cornish. But for argument's sake, we'll call it a Celtic oak. So it's genetically different than an English oak. So this is called a Quercus robur. And I told you this is going to get a little bit geeky when it comes to trees, but there's going to be a reason for this. So this is a Quercus robur. Quercus means oak. Quercus petraea. Quercus robur is the English. Quercus petraea. Quercus meaning oak and petraea meaning from the rock. So this is literally translates as the oak that grows from the rock. And that's going to become really important as we kind of move through the presentation as to why this is a key player in our Cornish landscape. So I'm just going to leave that kind of little bit of knowledge with you. It's also, as I was explaining to Lindsay, it's also my countdown. So this year, with the help of you guys, we're going to be planting 20,000 of these across the Cornish landscape. So a top tree planter can do about 200. And I'm just, setting the benchmark there for when you guys come along. I'll return the favour, I'll buy you a pasty. So when the leaves turn brown and fall off, that's when the tree's dormant. That's when we can start establishing these trees and get them in the ground. So right now the leaves are still nice, healthy and green, but they're going to fall off as we progress into autumn. And when they do turn brown, you've got left with that little stick. That's when we stick it in the ground, and that's when we're going to be able to successfully plant that tree. So that's what happens in winter. So yeah, brought it along to show you guys. It's a good kind of indication. I've just been at the Blue Earth Summit and I took that along with me. And I got some weird looks when I was like cuddling my tree on rush hour through the underground. Especially when I started like selfie, outside London monuments. So yeah, we're PlantOne. We create woodlands and we do that by engaging with businesses like yourself. We go out and we find bits of land and then we find bits of finance. We marry those two up and we create woodlands. We create these native habitats that should be, we should have lots of it across the Cornish landscape, but it's all been removed. So I know there's people kind of watching from their laptops at home, but for everyone here, I'll kind of keep it a little bit interactive. So, I'll kind of bounce some questions towards you guys and feel free to shout answers out or, just try to keep the abuse to a minimum. So yeah, PlantOne, here we go. So how it all started. So I'm a tree surgeon by trade. There's me. Yep. One day that's going to come back to haunt me, that picture. Yeah, cutting down a big tree there. But yeah, I started off life as I was explaining to Lindsay, moved down from Manchester, became an arborist and started managing trees. That's the industry word for cutting trees down. Yeah. Trees do need management. But once I started working with these awesome woodland creatures, you start to really kind of, love these kind of trees. They're amazing things, and you climb up into these big structures and you kind of climbing around these massive trees. You're like, these are amazing things. So I started to really get into kind of understanding the biomechanics and understanding why trees grow, how trees grow and why they're important. And then I got myself into this situation as a tree surgeon where I would have clients in places like Port Navis and Fiocc would drag me along and they'd say, oh yeah, we want this tree out. And I'd be like, it's a 300-year oak tree. And I'll be like, well, why do you want it gone? They'll be like, well, it's causing leaves to fall on our drive and I have to pay the gardeners to wake them up, or it's slightly blocking my view, or we just think it's unsafe. So I started to get myself into a situation where I was arguing with my clients to keep the tree, and then we'd get into a situation where they'd be like, well, if you don't do it, I'll just pay someone else to do it. And then I'd walk away and have to explain to my partner that rent was going to be a little bit difficult this year. So yeah, I then transitioned. It married up with the fact that I turned 40, and you know, I used to look at a big tree and be like, yeah, I can't wait to get into that. And now I look at a big tree and go, oh Christ. So it all started, where it all started was not necessarily because of this man, and I'm not here to have a go at Boris, but it just represents our leadership really. And I was stood on the beach at Carbis Bay during the G7, and I don't know if you guys remember how mental that was. You know, it's such a mental time. I was stood at Gadrevi Beach looking over at Carbis Bay Hotel. There was warships in the bay. Air Force One was being escorted over by those two Ospreys. Next to the ice cream vendor, there was a missile silo with ground-to-air missiles. You know, it was just like, this is bonkers. And right there, like our world leaders were discussing the fate of humanity. And on the table was the environment. You know, that was like key topic that we all believed was getting discussed. And being surrounded by all that power, you know, it was kind of a bit of a penny drop moment. It was like, we kind of need to have a little bit of a green revolution, and that never normally comes from the top down. It needs to be kind of grassroots, but it also needs to involve every person from the community and from society. And I don't think that's probably going to come from there. So I was stood on that beach and I thought, well, what can I do? And I understand trees. So I decided to find a piece of land, and I partnered up with these two guys, Chris and Ray. They're my business partners. And Chris Hines, Surface Against Sewage, he's our mentor and ambassador and guiding light, basically. I cornered Chris once and just bored him to death with oak facts. And then he was just like, what do you want? I was like, tell me how to make a tree version of Surface Against Sewage. So he's been mentoring us and leading us along for the last 6 years. So this is the team. We've now grown from being 3 of us to 10 of us. So there's 10 staff and there's 5 ambassadors, Chris being one of them. And yeah, we're a CIC, so we're not for profit. And yeah, we connect businesses, landowners and the community. So we bring volunteers and we connect you guys and we connect landowners, and we are here to reforest the Southwest. So yeah, let's go for this one. Cool. So anyone know what our canopy cover is across? We'll start at the UK. Anyone want to hazard a guess percentage-wise? 5%? 5? Okay. Anyone want to hazard a guess what it is here in Cornwall? I mean, I'm from Cheshire and I drive around and I'm like, what are these massive wooden things that we've got everywhere in Cheshire? And it's like blooming trees. And then I come down to Cornwall, I'm like, where are the trees? So, it's 8% here in Cornwall. It's 13% UK. And how does that compare across Europe? It's 35 to 40% across Europe. Those numbers are a little bit arbitrary until we understand, you know, where we've come from. We should have, across Cornwall, across the UK, we should have 90% woodland cover. That's where we were. And we've progressed as we went from hunter-gatherer into agriculture. We started chopping them down. And as we became a modern country and moved through our industrial revolution, we really sacrificed our natural capital, our natural resources. And that was another motivation for why I set PlantOne up, because we're quite often pointing the finger at developing nations. You know, Brazil, Bolsonaro is getting the blame for the Amazon, Modi in India getting the blame for cutting down trees. But we did this years ago. So, you know, I'm a big fan of saying, you know, let's tidy up our backyard and then we can start preaching to other countries. So yeah, and because of that, this is we've become one of the least biodiverse countries in the world. So yeah, we're really struggling. You know, we have this, I grew up on a farm in a kind of a place a bit like that, thinking that these pastoral landscape was the wilderness and thinking, you know, I was surrounded by nature. But when we look at a picture of our countryside like that, we've got cows in the background, we've got heavily chemically influenced fields, and then we've got a little copse of woods, and then we've got a few trees in the landscape where our native wildlife is living. and being pushed to is just the boundaries. So just that little copse of fields and the hedgerows there. Nothing is surviving in those fields. That's a monocultural crop. You know, you don't get any animals that live in there. And I remember growing up in the farm and running across the fields and thinking I was like, you know, in the middle of the wilderness, but kind of thinking, where are all the animals? And then we drive around the UK and you realise that this pastoral landscape is heavily industrial, chemically enhanced agriculture, and all of our animals are pushed to those fringe bits of wilderness of the hedges. You can start to understand why we're in this position of being one of the least biodiverse countries in the world. So yeah, I mean, I'll try not to go on too many tangents, and Lindsay, if you can just please, like, you know, get me going along. But as I grew up in Manchester, I used to be a bit of a boy racer. I used to drive around quite a lot, and every evening I used to spend like getting the insects off my car. You know, the bonnet used to be covered in it. I used to spend all evening like polishing my drive around now. How often do you see insect spiders on your windscreen? You know, that's a decline in, you know, when did I pass my driving test? 25 years ago. But yeah, in 25 years, it's gone from, you know, the bonnet of my car being covered in insects to driving around on a summer's evening, you might get one bug splat. And it's because of this pastoral chemical landscape that we have now. So yeah, we need our natural habitat to come back, and that is woodland. So yeah, here we are, Cornwall. We all know and love it. These red splotches are the remains of our woodlands. So that should have been just continuously red pretty much all the way down to Penwith. And it goes back to this tree, because quite often the conversations that I have with people is like, yeah, but Cornwall shouldn't have any trees. You know, it's too rocky, too exposed. This is when I introduce this guy. He'll grow absolutely anywhere. The Cornish oak, Quercus petraea, literally means of the rock. So its natural habitat is West Penwith, battered by the coast, battered by the winds. This will survive there and thrive there. And we've cut all those trees down, so we get into this situation where we have shifting baselines, where we can only talk back and remember back to our last generation. Well, there's no trees in the landscape, so that's natural. But if we go further back, and if we go back enough in time, there should be a woodland there. And because we've removed those trees, we removed the shelter belt that protects the trees. So then you get into a situation where natural regeneration, where trees like your acorn in your back garden that we were just chatting about, no longer can happen because it's getting buffeted by these winds that are now whipping down any kind of regrowth. Also, we have a big deer population, which doesn't help. So, yeah, I think I've covered that. Like I say, I'll going into tangents here a little bit. So yeah, wellbeing crisis, you know, I'm a big fan of social prescribing. Let's get out into our woodlands, let's get out and engage with nature, you know, let's kind of go for those walks, and woodlands are the best place to do that. Canopy crisis, 98% of our ancient woodlands have been felled, so 2% remaining of our ancient woodlands. Climate crisis, just talked about that, and the biodiversity crisis. But I want to introduce this guy into the conversation as well. Does anyone know what that is? You would have seen it around middle of summer, driving around Cornwall hedges and roads. You would have seen a tree that looks like that, looking like it's struggling along. Anyone want to hazard it? Exactly, yeah. It's ash dieback. One of our biggest threats that we have to our trees is pests and diseases. And right now, you know, I'm from the 80s and I never understood what an elm tree was, because all the elms were removed from our landscape because of Dutch elm disease. The Dutch weren't to blame, they just discovered it. So don't go, my partner's from there, it's not her fault. But ash dieback came in from China and it's absolutely run rampant through our landscape. We first found it in 2002 and since then it's killed 11 million trees and will impact 19% of our woodland cover. And it's unstoppable, there's no stopping it, unfortunately. So we're going to lose ash trees. They're going to go the same way elm trees have gone. We've got other diseases coming in, oak processionary moth, acute oak death. These are all threats to our national tree stock, and that's because we're in a changing climate, and that's because we have a globalized system. The biggest importer of timber outside of China is the UK. We bring in more timber than any other country, and our natural resource is woodlands. You know, that's kind of a bonkers kind of thing to do. You know, we should have a fantastic, beautiful forestry industry where we're supplying high quality timber products, but we've chopped all those trees down, forestry is on its knees, and now we're importing tons and tons of, and with it come along this chap, ash dieback, and threatens our natural stock. So yeah, we're up against it a little bit. So I think that's an obvious thing. We need woodlands. So yeah, woodlands are where our native wildlife live. That's their natural habitat. They don't live in fields. They don't live in Bodmin Moor. You know, there's habitat there for sure, but Bodmin Moor should have been a woodland. And this is a little bit whimsical, but it perfectly encapsulates the ability for natural regeneration to happen. And anyone who's got a garden will know that just trees are constantly popping up, and you're constantly having to pull out sycamores or oaks out of the ground. You know, they're constantly firing up. So Wendell Berry, bit of a fan of him. I'll read this quote out, and it just simply says, "The soil under the grass is dreaming of a young forest, and under the pavement, the soil is dreaming of grass." I just love the fact that encapsulates the work that we're trying to do. Sometimes all you need to do with the work we're all engaged in now, talking about you guys because you're going to come along to our planting day, is sometimes you just need to step back and put a fence in and allow the grazing animals, allow the herbivores to move away from that site. And all of a sudden you'll start seeing these little oaks pop up. Does anyone know what the biggest planter of oak trees are in this country? By far.
Planter?
Yeah. What plants more oak trees than any other animal?
The wind.
Nope, it's not windfall. So it's definitely an animal. Most people will normally say it's the squirrel. Yeah, exactly. It's like that QI thing where it's like, But it's not the squirrel. They've just got good marketing. It is the jay. So does anyone, a jay is the little flash of blue bird that you see flying around. Awesome, awesome bird. Its beak is exactly the same length that you need to plant an acorn. It always plants an acorn the right way up, and it plants thousands of them. And it forgets 80% of the oaks that it plants. So it's a really helpful, forgetful bird. And it goes around, and we were talking, weren't we, before? You said there was an oak sapling or an acorn where there shouldn't be any acorns because it's nowhere near the potential of windfall. Well, there's a good chance that was either brought in by a jay or second down, magpie. But yeah, they'll always plant it the right way around, and I absolutely love that because there's something fascinating about that. Here these jays are doing all the work for us, and that they need to live in oak woodlands. That's their natural habitat, Atlantic oak woods. And what they're doing is they're grabbing all these acorns, flying out to the countryside where there's no oaks, and then planting them all, and then watching these oak trees go up. So they're manufacturing their landscape in which they live in. And I think that's absolutely brilliant. Either that, or they're just really forgetful. So, you know, I don't know. Maybe they're connected. I would like to think that they're out there doing the work of a great forester. So yeah, why us? So it goes back to what I was saying about the resources and pointing the finger at countries like India and Brazil. Like, what I really wanted to do with PlantOne is to create tangibility and through that accountability. Every tree that you support us to plant, I can literally show you where it's gone and I can show you how it's doing. And we've got sites with public access. You know, we were talking about a site in Praise just down the way there. You know, once we've planted those trees, you can visit that site, drive past that site, take a dog for a walk in that site and watch those trees grow on year after year. And that accountability is from that tangibility. And I think there's something fantastic about that, you know, watching the habitats that we plant slowly grow up. So yeah, that's why I think you should go with us. You've already committed, so yeah, preaching to the converted. So yeah, this is what I really wanted to get a conversation about, and this is temperate rainforests, something extremely unique to the west coast of the UK. Has anyone heard of temperate rainforests? Yeah, brilliant. Mate, that's one of our sites. Yeah. So we're back there again this year, and we've got a 15-year contract with Kabila, so we'll be going back there year after year. So I might be a little bit, thinner here and bigger here, but so you met Merlin.
It was a couple of years, probably.
Yeah. Merlin is not a wizard, that's his actual name. So he's the owner of this site called Kabila. It's 100 acres of temperate rainforest, and we're expanding that by a further 150 acres. But yeah, so what is a temperate rainforest? Well, it's an Atlantic oak wood, and it exists because of our relationship with the Atlantic Ocean. So we live in a region here in Cornwall along the west coast called hyperoceanic, and that means two things: consistent temperatures, it's never too hot, never too cold, and it also means lots and lots of rain. Terrible if you're planning a barbecue, terrible if you've got friends coming down for the weekend, amazing if you're one of these. This is what they actually thrive on. It's about water, it's about access to rainfall. Now, these only really exist up the west coast, and it's because of that relationship with the Atlantic. But also, what our woodlands are doing along the west coast is also preserving the coastline. It's stopping runoff, it's stopping erosion. There's a really intrinsic link between the ocean and our woodlands. And we're an island nation, but we're a woodland tribe. So we need to kind of ensure that our ecosystems aren't working in isolation. There's a relationship between those ecosystems, and they're there to protect each other. That temperate rainforest existed from northern Spain all the way up to Scotland in a continuous belt. And now it's been fragmented to the point of 98% of it being cut down. Tropical rainforest isn't being devastated the way that temperate rainforest has. There's less temperate rainforest than there is tropical rainforest. And we've got this opportunity here in Cornwall to restore, expand and protect that habitat that is unique to the west coast of the UK. So anyone know what that is? Yes, it is. It is in fact Fangorn Forest. Yeah, and you know, why is that up here? Well, one, I'm a big fan of Lord of the Rings. I'll try not to go on a tangent about that, but we've all seen the films though, right? Yeah, brilliant. So Mirkwood and Fangorn, these dense, damp, mossy covered, boulder strewn woodlands, you know, there's a reason that those woodlands look like our temperate rainforest, and it's because of this chap here. Anyone know where that is? It's quite a famous temperate rainforest. It's on Dartmoor. It's Wistman's Wood. So it's the last remaining bit of ancient temperate rainforest on Dartmoor. Dartmoor's been absolutely clear felled. Grazing has then battered it back, but there's this pocket of Wistman's Wood. It's about 3 acres. It's very small, but that is a dense temperate rainforest. That's an iconic temperate rainforest, and the illustrator, the lady who illustrated the first editions of Tolkien books, lived next to Wistman's Wood. So when she was looking for inspiration for Fangorn Forest, these mythical landscapes, she took a walk in Wistman's Wood, and that's why Fangorn and Wistman's Wood are identical. And we go back to the Quercus petraea, the oak that grows from the rock. Look, completely covered in boulders and rocks and big lumps of just inaccessible, inhospitable, tough growing grounds. But if you're a Quercus petraea, this is where you thrive. You've evolved to live in thin soils and windy conditions, and that is perfect. So when anyone says, oh, Cornwall shouldn't have any trees because it's too rocky, introduce them to this landscape. So yeah, so there's a picture of a tree that I took at Kabila. So this is what makes a temperate rainforest. It's called epiphytes. Epiphytes are plants that grow on plants. Here we've got polypod ferns, we've got mosses, we've got lichens, we've got old man's beard growing up into it, we've got ivy, and then we've got beautiful fungi all surviving on this one tree, and it just creates this complete ecosystem within this one tree. You know, this is one oak gives habitat for hundreds and hundreds of species. So yeah, and that's all because of this rainfall and this temperate climate that we have. It just blossoms life into these species-rich woodlands, and we have an opportunity to restore and to recreate these woodlands that we've decimated. There was a guy back in the 1900s, went around, convinced all the local landowners to cut down their old growth Atlantic oak woods and replace it with fast-growing pine. So off the back of First World War, decimated our canopy cover. We went down to 2% because of ammo stocks. You know, everything was made out of wood back then. And some economists convinced all the big landowners like the Vivians, the St Albans, to cut down their Atlantic oak and and then grow sick to spruce basically. So when you drive through Bodmin, you see these old spruce plantations, but then that came completely redundant because 20 years it takes to grow a spruce. Within 20 years, from 1920 to 1940, we developed a new product called plastic. So we were just left with all these stupid monocultural woodlands all over the Cornish landscape, and we'd sacrificed our native woodlands. So that's why we need these back in our landscape. We need native biodiverse, species-rich woodlands. So I didn't think I was going to go on that rant, but I did. So, so yeah, I want to show you this. So you guys live in Cornwall. For the people that don't live in Cornwall, unlucky for you, because we live in a beautiful part of the world. And this is where we live. You guys been down to the Fal or the Helford, the Foy? Yeah, pretty good spot. So I live down in Gweek, which is the muddy end of the Helford. So this is just up the way from me, and it's a video I made. It really kind of shows off what a temperate rainforest is. So it's only 30 seconds. So those woods that we were showing then, Murden Woods along the Helford, never been cut down, never been chopped, never been clear felled. That's what would cover, once upon a time, the whole of Cornwall, that Atlantic oak wood. And the only reason that these trees haven't been cut down is they were just too hard to access, really. There was a little bit of charcoal production going on, but there's just little slithers along those banks that have remained. But we should really have that continuous cover of woodland all the way through Cornwall, but we've cut it down. And now we're left with these fantastic places where, you know, we're so lucky down here because there's nowhere else in the UK where the branches of oak trees literally dip their fingers into the Atlantic Ocean like they do in the Foy and the Helford and the Fal. I mean, it's really is a magical place. So yeah, that's a fantastic woodland there. And did you go in the woods at Cabilla? Yeah, that's pretty cool as well. But those moss-covered boulders and that lovely river running through it, yeah, amazing. Right, cool. So yeah, this is the end game, you know. It takes hundreds of years for a field to become an ancient woodland, of course it does. But it only takes about 8 to 10 years for it to start to feel like a woodland. So in 10 years' time, the trees that we've planted, when you walk through that, you won't be saying to yourself, oh, shall we walk through this field? It'll start to feel like a woodland. The trees will be above our heads. Nice field layer will start popping up. Bluebells will start to, again, encroach into the woods. You know, they find bluebell seeds that are hundreds of years old that have just laid dormant, waiting for that right moment to come back again. So it doesn't, oh, sorry, am I causing this to flicker? So it really doesn't, and it goes back to that poem, and it's the reason I left it in there. It doesn't take much for the fields to start to become woodlands and habitat again. And we're not here to take land out of food production. That's not what PlantOne's about. What we're here to do is work with local landowners, and we're trying to just thicken up those areas that are existing. So make areas like Merlin's place at Cabilla, just extend what he's already got there, extend the hedgerows, extend the woodlands. We're not here to carpet cover everything in trees. I mean, that's what I would like, but we've got to have a balance. We've got to work with the community, and food production and agroforestry is a key part of our work. So yeah, we're not just here to carpet everything in trees. We just got to. Okay, I'm going to go back to the slideshow. How am I doing for time? Good for time. Well, we're getting to the end, so we can do some questions. So yeah, land partners, Cabilla, Bodmin, talked about it. There it is. You probably went on a tour a little bit like that. Yeah, nice. 300 acres, and that's his temperate rainforest there in the valley. Beautiful. And we're extending it by 100 acres. And then that's always exciting to talk about those big, kind of fantastic sites, you know, brilliant. What I really love is this site here. So you might know it. This is the the Helston to Red Roof Road. So you've got the Great Flat Load on the left-hand side of the screen, and it's been completely decimated. You know, there's not a tree in sight. If you drive along that road up towards Red Roof, you'll come across a cottage, and the cottage is called Forest Cottage. And it's from like the 1800s. There isn't a tree to be seen. It's either a very, very ironic farmer or, you know, there would have been a woodland there once upon a time. Next door to it, I'm not making this up, is Ash Tree Cottage. So you can see where I'm going with this. No trees in that landscape whatsoever, completely decimated. So we've planted an acre, just here, done this bit here, like that. It's a drop in the water when it comes to national tree cover. But for this area, if you're a migratory bird or if you're a hedgehog, a fox or a badger, there's nowhere for you to find food and habitat and shelter. Willow. Told you not to do this. She just had a heart scan, hence why her nipples have been shaven. I'm sorry, Willow. I know, yeah. Embarrassed you, haven't I, Willow? So it's a really important site, and that's kind of one of the key things that I get, really excited about. And over the years that I'm doing this job, I want to start just making little wildlife corridors dotted throughout the landscape, because that's really important. That's more important, or just as important as these bigger sites. And on a site like that, there's nothing's coming in. There's no natural regeneration. The jays can't go that far. We've got to give them a seed bank to start with. So that's where tree planting really comes into its own. That's where we take a site and we'll probably do like 95% tree planting. On some sites, we're just putting in fencing and letting natural regeneration happen. But on sites like that, it's mostly tree planting. Right. Some of our organisations that we work with don't have Philps up there. I'm going to have a word with them. These are some of our local guys that we work with. You probably work with these guys as well, people like Wilderness. How much does it cost to create a woodland? When I started this, everybody was like, well, why should we go with you? We can go with Ecology, and they charge £1 a tree. And then you get to put a nice little tree count on your website and say we planted, thousands of trees. But the real cost in planting a tree isn't the sticking it in the ground, it isn't the stake in the guard. It's coming back year after year after year after year to make sure that tree becomes a woodland. And to do that, it costs £19,000 a hectare. And that gives us the finance, the resources to go back to that site for 7 years to ensure that we're left with a woodland and not just a field of dead sticks. So that's where your money's going to be going. Project benefits, you get a hug from me. I think we've ticked off most of these. Cool. And in closing, I'll wrap it up now and leave a bit of time for questions. It is easy to get overwhelmed. That's kind of where I started from. Got kind of depressed when I stood on that beach looking at the world leaders talking about the environment. And I just took a small field and planted some trees, and at the back of that, we planted 600 trees, and it felt like we'd actually affected change. And it goes back to that little site that I was just talking about, coming together and planting that one site, that makes a difference. So, if you come along to one of our planting days, which I think is voluntary, it might not be voluntary, but I think at the back of it, you step back and say there's 10 people that come along and we all plant, realistically 100 trees. Somebody could do the maths, I can't. It's 1,000, right? Yeah. Look, I'm an arborist. I'm an idiot when it comes to figures. Yeah, 1,000 trees. 1,000 trees is a lot, especially when you start thinking about that tree that I showed you the picture of, covered in all that habitat and species, rich habitation. That is a difference, So coming together and working together as a community. I heard this fantastic thing at Blue Earth Summit, which, by the way, was amazing to go to because Cornwall was overrepresented. Blue Earth Summit, one of the biggest sustainability summits in the UK, and there were so many Cornish businesses there, so it's fantastic to partner with you guys. I think we're really kind of paving the way in Cornwall when it comes to regenerative business. But for us, it's understanding that sometimes conservation doesn't have a business plan, and business doesn't have a conservation plan. So it's about using that as an opportunity to come together, because it's not about profit, it's about prosperity. And that's where we should all be heading, because, you know, the rising tide lifts all boats, that kind of thing. So yeah, brilliant. That's everything. Oh no, there we go. One last quote. So I'm a bit of a sci-fi geek, so I found this on Reddit and thought it was brilliant. So I'll read it out and then I'll shut up. So when people talk about time travel, they worry about radically changing the present by doing something small. But barely anyone in the present thinks they can radically change the future by doing something small today. So it's literally about that. It's about those small, collective, little changes that we can all make. And that's going to create that kind of that's going to create that momentum. And I really do believe we're now at that handbrake moment where we're starting to chuck the bloody runaway car around and hopefully head towards a regenerative, sustainable future. So yeah, cheers. Thank you for your partnership and thank you for hearing me talk. Brilliant. Any questions?
How much space do you need to grow a tree? I've just got a new build house and my garden is completely empty and I want to make sure it's as diverse as I can make it. But
yeah, I mean,
an opener plot at home that was gifted to me by my aunt years ago that sort of inspired me. But
yeah. Well, I mean, we.
Next to brand new houses is
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, like, tree failure is very rare. It's just that when there's a storm and you drive around and you see the 5 trees that have fallen over, but you don't see the thousands that are still remaining. So yeah, absolutely. Don't plant it right next to your house, but give it 5 meters. So we plant our trees at 3 meter spacings. So yeah, 5 meters, 3 to 5 meters away from your house. Pretty good, I reckon. Yeah. Yeah, cool. Any other questions?
So if we do a planting day, will we just be planting the oaks?
No. So we plant the woodlands that we're trying to create are, sorry, I'm bugging it up now, aren't I? I'll turn it off. So the woodlands that we're trying to create are called Atlantic oak woods, temperate rainforest. So the oak is the key player, the star player, does most of the heavy lifting in our woodlands. So we're looking at 60 to 65% oak woodlands, but then the rest of the 35% is a mix of species. So we're planting alder, rowan, birch, holly, hazel, hawthorn, and then normally stuff like blackthorn and willow just comes in on the wind. So yeah, we'll be planting a whole mix of trees. But yeah, oak is our star player and it will form the backbone of our woodlands. So yeah, there'll be a mix.
And if you did a day, say this year, and then we went back in a year, what would you expect to see in that first year? Much? Or?
So yeah, absolutely. So the first 2-3 years, a tree's putting down its roots, and then it really starts to romp on from about year 4, year 5, to the point where, you know, I need to upload some pictures onto my presentation. But yeah, a tree can be as tall as this part of the building within 5 years in the right conditions. Especially your alders and your birch, they grow up really fast. Oaks are light demanding and they grow quite slow, but your nursery species or your pioneer species, which are your birch and your alders and your hazels, they'll just, in the right conditions with the right shelter, they'll just romp along. And yeah, willow will be there. We do have a nursery just at my house, but that's just because we're trying to inject local providence. So I just go around and sort of collect acorns like that, shake the tree. But we get most of our trees from the grower in St Agnes. So local stock, local supply. Which is important, but it's not, you kind of want to bring in a bit of genetic diversity as well. So I think as the climate changes, what we're going to start looking at doing is finding the same tree, but from the south of Europe, because they might be a bit more resistant to the temperatures that we have in this country. I mean, we got to our first 40 degrees day last year, and it was 40.1. Oak trees, their timber literally starts to break down at 40 degrees. But in a woodland setting, it's, you know, if you walk in a woodland when it's hot, it's actually quite cool in there. So hopefully there's going to be enough resilience within our natural tree stock to combat the very ravages of climate change, the worst of the climate change. So yeah, keep that temperate region going, hopefully. Yeah.
Do you have any sort of visual, you showed us a map there of like what it currently looks like, you know, in terms of those pockets of woodlands across Cornwall.
Yeah.
Do you have, apart from it being like full red?
All red, yeah.
Do you have like a sort of realistic ambition, what 5, 10, 15 years that might look like?
Well, I mean, I do need to update this with a couple of graphics, but the UK government identified that we need to plant 30,000 hectares of woodland a year to meet our biodiversity goals. And that's an increase nationally from 13% to 18%. So the UK has said by 2050 we need an additional 5% canopy cover across the UK. Currently, you'd be surprised to learn that we're planting about 40% of what we need to plant across the country. So yeah, going off the own government's metrics, we need an additional 5% in the next 50 years. So hopefully, with the work that we're going to do together, we can nibble that up a little bit. Yeah. And like I said, it's not about blanket covering everything. It's just about working in those areas where there's existing woodland, there's existing hedgerows, or just grade 3 and below arable land, which isn't being farmed. So yeah. Yeah.
How often do you like run planting days and can sort of anyone
Yep.
get involved?
Yeah,
Or do you want something?
100%, yeah. So we've got 20,000 to plant. So, the guys that work for us do about 150 a day. I do about 50 a day. Someone's got to supervise. So, we run. So we're starting our planting day schedule on the 29th of November, and then we'll run all the way through to the end of Feb. Slight problem nowadays that we have is that tree shouldn't really have any green leaves on it. You know, I was bloody sat by the Helford baking in the sun on Sunday. You know, our autumns are milder and longer. Our spring is milder and coming quicker. So our planting season, you have to plant before the buds appear and after the leaves drop off. So we're getting squeezed right down to our planting season. You know, it should be pretty chilly now, but it's not. So yeah. Sorry, answer your question. From the end of November to the end of February, every day, pretty much. And we're going to do an engagement day with you guys where there's going to be a chance for you to come along, but we'll also do weekend days where there's a chance for families to come along as well. Yeah. Yeah, cool. Yeah. Any other questions?
No questions online.
Cool. Yeah. No, it's all good. Yeah. Oh, well, cheers. Can I get a